The night was cold and quiet, but that silence was soon shattered by a distressing call to 911. At exactly 9 p.m., a concerned passerby reported seeing a young woman lying on the side of the road, wounded and barely moving. Several drivers, noticing something unusual on the road, pulled over. Their headlights illuminated a horrifying scene. At 9:12 p.m., the first police unit arrived at the scene. Officers quickly stepped out of their vehicle, their flashlights scanning the area. But by then, Lauren had already lost consciousness. She lay still, her lips turning pale, her breathing faint and unsteady. Minutes later, the wail of sirens pierced the air as paramedics rushed to the scene. They worked swiftly but carefully. As they lifted Lauren onto the stretcher, one of them checked her pulse, barely there, just a weak, fragile rhythm keeping her tethered to life. Her condition was critical. Time was running out. Hey friends, liking, commenting, and subscribing only takes a few seconds, but it means so much to us. Every click and comment fuels our passion. Thanks. Join us as we explore the true crime case of Lauren Burke, who was born on December 30, 1989, in the quiet suburban city of Marietta, Georgia, where she spent her formative years surrounded by family. Her parents, James Burke and Viviane Gershon, were once a loving couple but eventually parted ways, leaving Lauren and her siblings, sister Jacqueline Burke and brother Chad Burke, to navigate a new family dynamic. Despite the divorce, Lauren maintained a close relationship with both of her parents, and they continued to be active participants in her life, supporting her in every possible way. She was a bright and talented young woman, known for her warm personality and ability to light up any room with her infectious smile. Friends, classmates, and teachers alike described Lauren as a determined, hard-working, and kind-hearted person who was always willing to lend a hand. During her high school years, Lauren demonstrated a strong sense of ambition, excelling both academically and socially. She was passionate about art and creativity, which led her to pursue a degree in graphic design at Auburn University. When she started college, she became an active member of the Delta Gamma sorority, where she quickly formed close friendships. Beyond her involvement in Greek life, she was also a dedicated athlete, playing lacrosse with remarkable skill and dedication. Her involvement in various activities on campus made her well known among her peers. She was the type of person who left a lasting impression, whether in the classroom, on the field, or simply in casual conversations with friends. While still a high school student, Lauren met and began dating Sean McQuaid, a young man who would become a significant part of her life. Their relationship was one of mutual support and deep affection, and even after high school, their bond remained strong. Both Lauren and Sean decided to continue their education at Auburn University, where they pursued their studies while maintaining their relationship. Despite the typical challenges that come with young love and the rigors of college life, they often spoke of their future together, dreaming of careers, marriage, and building a life side by side. Education was their primary focus, but it never overshadowed their plans and aspirations as a couple. On the morning of March 4, 2008, Lauren started her day as she often did, with a casual breakfast at a cafe, enjoying the company of her longtime boyfriend, Sean. The couple shared light-hearted conversation, savoring their meal before parting ways for the day. At 11 a.m., Lauren attended her scheduled class, where she remained engaged and focused. Shortly after, she made a routine phone call to her father, James, discussing plans for the upcoming spring break and an appointment with the dentist. The conversation was pleasant and ordinary, another brief moment in their close father-daughter relationship. After finishing her call, she made her way to Sean's dormitory, spending the afternoon and early evening in his company, sharing laughter, conversations, and the ease of young love. By the time evening fell, Lauren had another commitment, an academic meeting at the library with her classmate Michael to work on a study assignment. The two had agreed to meet at 8:30 p.m. to prepare their work, and Lauren, ever diligent, intended to keep her promise. Around 8 p.m., she bid Sean goodbye, stepping out into the cool evening air. Darkness had already settled over the campus as she walked toward her parked car, a black 2001 Honda Civic stationed near the dormitory lot. Unbeknownst to her, this was the last time Sean would ever see her alive. When Lauren failed to show up at the library, Michael began calling her cell phone, puzzled by her absence. Initially, his calls went unanswered, and his concern grew. He dialed again and again until, at last, Lauren picked up. Her voice on the other end of the line was different, detached, and hurried. She told him she had completely forgotten about their meeting and wouldn't be coming to the library. Before he could question her further, the call abruptly ended. Michael was left feeling uneasy, sensing that something was off, but unsure of what it could be. Shortly after, at approximately 9 p.m., a distressing call came through to 911. A passerby reported seeing an injured young woman lying on the road between the Farmville Baptist Church and Route 280 along Highway 147. Drivers stopped their vehicles, their headlights illuminating the harrowing scene before them. Lauren Burke was there, sprawled on the cold pavement, struggling to breathe. Her body bore multiple wounds, and she wore only socks on her feet. Witnesses watched in horror as she took slow, agonized breaths, desperately fighting for her life. At 9:12 p.m., the first police unit arrived on the scene, only to find Lauren unconscious. Minutes later, paramedics arrived, and as they carefully lifted her into the ambulance, they noted the barely detectable pulse that signaled the fragile thread by which her life was hanging. As Lauren was rushed to East Alabama Medical Center, medical professionals worked feverishly to stabilize her, but her injuries were extensive. Meanwhile, at 9:27 p.m., another alarming report reached 911 dispatchers. Multiple callers reported a vehicle engulfed in flames on the Auburn University campus. Firefighters and police units were dispatched immediately. By the time they arrived, a sizable crowd of students had gathered around the burning vehicle, watching as flames devoured the car. Unable to locate the owner among the spectators, police ran the license plates and discovered that the vehicle was registered to a man named James Burke, a resident of Georgia. That man was Lauren's father. Authorities quickly contacted James, who answered with confusion and concern. When they informed him that his vehicle was currently on fire at Auburn University, he was baffled until he realized that the car in question was actually his daughter's, a realization that sent a chill down his spine. His immediate question was the one the police could not answer. Where is Lauren? They had no information on her whereabouts and could only confirm that no one had been inside the burning car. A sense of dread overtook James as he frantically began dialing his daughter's phone, but each call went unanswered. His anxiety intensified with every passing second. Desperate for information, he reached out to Lauren's friends, hoping that someone, anyone, could tell him where she was. But no one had seen her. No one knew about the car fire, and no one could explain why Lauren wasn't answering her phone. Realizing that something was terribly wrong, James then called his ex-wife, Lauren's mother, Vivian Gershon, praying that she might have some insight into their daughter's whereabouts. Lauren's mother didn't know anything about what had happened either. Overcome with growing panic, she tried reaching her daughter multiple times, but each call went straight to voicemail. At 9:40 p.m., in desperation, Vivian dialed Sean McQuaid, Lauren's boyfriend, hoping he had some answers. That was the moment Sean first learned that Lauren was missing and that her car had been found engulfed in flames. A surge of dread gripped him as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. Frantically, he began calling Lauren's friends and acquaintances, piecing together whatever he could about her last known movements. It was during these frantic calls that Sean discovered Lauren had canceled her library meeting with Michael, stating that she had forgotten about it. However, this explanation didn't sit right with him. He knew, without a doubt, that Lauren had not forgotten about her appointment. Just 2 hours earlier, as she left his dorm room, she had specifically mentioned heading straight to the library. As Lauren's family and friends scrambled for answers, unaware of the full extent of the tragedy, doctors at East Alabama Medical Center were engaged in a desperate battle to save her life. Unconscious, critically wounded, and without any form of identification, Lauren arrived as an anonymous patient, her identity unknown to the medical team working to keep her alive. Despite the best efforts of skilled professionals, the damage was too severe. The single gunshot wound had been fatal. The bullet, which had entered her body at close range before exiting, causing irreversible damage. An expert medical assessment concluded that the firearm's muzzle had been mere inches from her skin at the time the trigger was pulled. After approximately an hour of unrelenting efforts to stabilize her, Lauren succumbed to her injuries. She was pronounced dead, her promising life cruelly extinguished. While doctors fought to keep Lauren alive, law enforcement officials had begun piecing together the troubling puzzle. The connection between the unidentified young woman at the hospital and the burned-out car discovered on campus was quickly established. By comparing the missing owner of the charred Honda Civic with the latest victim admitted to the emergency room, authorities realized the horrifying truth. The girl who had not survived was none other than Lauren Burke. The following morning, March 5, 2008, Lauren's father, James Burke, traveled from Atlanta to officially identify his daughter's body. Grief and devastation overcame him as he confirmed what he had feared the night before. His daughter was gone. Word of Lauren's tragic death spread like wildfire across Auburn University, sending shockwaves through the student body and faculty. Auburn University administration released an official statement acknowledging the crime, expressing condolences, and urging students and staff to remain cautious. However, they also reassured the community that there was no immediate threat to student safety. Many of you and your parents have reached out with understandable concerns. At this time, there is no evidence to suggest any ongoing danger to campus residents, the statement read. Lauren's sorority, Delta Gamma, also issued a public statement mourning the unexpected and deeply disturbing loss of one of their own. The organization encouraged members of the Auburn chapter to fully cooperate with law enforcement, ensuring that authorities had every piece of information necessary to bring the perpetrator to justice. While Lauren's family and friends were left grappling with immeasurable grief, law enforcement officials were racing against time to uncover the identity of the person responsible. Investigators had two immediate priorities: determining how the brutal killing was connected to the car fire and establishing whether other students could be at risk. Police meticulously processed the area where Lauren had been found on the road, as well as the Auburn University parking lot where her vehicle had been burned. Captain Tom Stauffer of the Auburn Police Department addressed the public, promising that every available resource would be deployed to track down the perpetrator. "We will put every effort into finding the person responsible for this horrific act," Stauffer declared. Auburn, Alabama is a quiet student community. We take these tragedies personally. If someone is harmed, we all feel it, and we won't rest until justice is served. In a further effort to incentivize cooperation, Alabama Governor Bob Riley announced a $10,000 reward for information leading to an arrest in Lauren Burke's case. Lauren's scorched Honda Civic was transported to the Auburn Police Department, where investigators from the State Forensic Laboratory and Fire Chief's office meticulously examined its charred remains. Inside the burned vehicle, they uncovered remnants of Lauren's personal belongings, including scraps of clothing, the melted remains of her digital camera, and a partially destroyed owner's manual. But the most significant discovery came from underneath the front seat: a .38 caliber bullet. This chilling find led investigators to a disturbing conclusion. The car itself may have been the crime scene. The evidence suggested that Lauren had been shot inside the vehicle, and the fire had been deliberately set to destroy crucial forensic traces. Determined to find answers, detectives launched an exhaustive series of interviews with Lauren's family, friends, and boyfriend. Yet, despite their best efforts, no one could name a single person with a motive to harm Lauren. Everyone they spoke with described Lauren as universally well-liked, with no known enemies or ongoing conflicts. Investigators also turned their attention to Sean, as he had been the last known person to see Lauren alive. His dormitory was thoroughly searched, but no evidence was found to suggest his involvement in the crime. Detectives then spoke to Michael, the classmate Lauren had planned to meet at the library. His testimony provided a new, eerie detail. When Lauren finally answered his phone call that night, he recalled hearing an unusual sound in the background, something resembling the steady hum of a moving vehicle. This revelation raised unsettling possibilities. Could she have been in a car with someone against her will? Was she attempting to communicate distress in the only way she could? As the investigation deepened, another alarming discovery emerged. At the same time, it emerged that someone had used Lauren's bank card several times shortly after she was found lying in the road. In all likelihood, the individual in possession of Lauren's bank card was directly involved in the horrific chain of events leading to her demise. With this crucial lead in hand, authorities immediately intensified their search for the suspect. However, just as investigators were narrowing their focus, the case took a dramatic and unexpected turn. Less than 3 days after Lauren's passing, On the morning of March 7, 2008, at exactly 10 a.m., another shocking crime unfolded, this time in the parking lot of a Walmart supermarket in Newnan, Georgia, approximately 75 miles from Auburn. A man's sudden and violent attack on a 72-year-old woman as she was about to enter her vehicle. Without hesitation, rendering her momentarily disoriented, then issued a menacing, ordering her into the passenger seat. With calculated aggression, the assailant climbed into the driver's seat, preparing to flee the scene with his terrified victim. However, his escape did not go unnoticed. A keen-eyed bystander in the parking lot witnessed the attack unfold and promptly dialed the police while following the stolen vehicle at a safe distance. Realizing he was being observed and possibly pursued, the attacker panicked. He suddenly abandoned his plan, veering back into the Walmart parking lot, where he brought the car to an abrupt stop. In a desperate attempt to evade capture, he leaped out of the stolen vehicle and sprinted towards a nearby silver Chrysler Sebring. Without wasting a second, he climbed inside and sped away, vanishing into the streets beyond. Authorities were quick to respond. Within hours, a high-speed pursuit ensued, involving 4 determined police units tracking the fleeing Chrysler as it raced toward Columbus, West Georgia. The suspect showed complete disregard for public safety, weaving recklessly through traffic, endangering countless lives in a desperate bid to escape. During the chase, officers observed a sudden movement. The driver tossed an object out of the car window. Recognizing the potential significance of this discarded item, one of the trailing patrol units momentarily broke away to search the roadside. Their instincts proved correct. Lying amid the dirt and gravel was a .38 caliber revolver, an ominous discovery that could later play a pivotal role in the case. Meanwhile, the pursuit continued at breakneck speed, but fate was not on the suspect's side. His vehicle began to sputter, smoke billowing from beneath the hood. Within moments, the engine failed, forcing him to make a sudden stop in the middle of the roadway. Desperate, he swung open the car door in an attempt to flee on foot. But in an unfortunate twist of events, a police officer on a motorcycle, unable to react in time, crashed directly into the open door. The officer was hurled over the handlebars, landing hard on the pavement. Miraculously, he escaped serious injury, but his fall bought the suspect precious seconds to make a frantic dash into the dense forest lining the road. The wooded terrain provided an illusion of escape, but the manhunt was swift and relentless. Officers pursued him into the trees, tracking his movements with precision. Within moments, they closed in on him, tackling him to the ground and snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. The fugitive had nowhere left to run. The man in custody was soon identified as Courtney Lero Lockhart, born on October 20th, 1984. To those who had known him before, Lockhart had once been a carefree, fun-loving young man. However, his time in the military had altered him irreversibly. In 2004, Lockhart served in the U.S. Army, but when he returned in 2005, he was no longer the same man. According to his family, something inside him had shifted. His mother recalled how her once cheerful son had stopped smiling altogether. He had developed an acute sense of paranoia, refusing to allow anyone to stand behind him, and often retreating to hide in closets or under beds. His experiences had clearly left psychological scars that he never spoke about, but their effects were undeniable. By 2006, Lockhart's life had begun to spiral further out of control. That year, his girlfriend gave birth to their daughter, though by then, their relationship had already fallen apart. That same year, his once promising military career came to an end. Lockhart was court-martialed for multiple infractions, including against fellow soldiers, illicit substance abuse, and unauthorized desertion from his unit. Following a brief period of confinement lasting 7 months, he was discharged from the Army in December 2006, left to navigate the civilian world with no direction and mounting inner demons. As 2008 approached, those closest to Lockhart noticed an alarming deterioration in his behavior. He barely showered, ceased visiting his young daughter. He drifted further into a dark and dangerous lifestyle, one that culminated in a spree of violent crimes. Beginning in February 2008, Lockhart embarked on a series of brazen burglaries, targeting unsuspecting women in parking lots. He would approach his victims from behind just as they were entering their cars and demand their purses and possessions. In some cases, he attempted to steal their vehicles outright. His crimes escalated in severity, and it was one such attack that led to the tragic death of Lauren Burke. Lockhart's reign of terror came to an end on March 7, 2008, following his failed attempt to abduct the elderly woman in Noonan and his subsequent capture after the police chase. Once in custody, he was transported to the police station for questioning. It was there, under the scrutiny of seasoned investigators, that Lockhart made a shocking confession. He admitted to kidnapping and murdering Lauren Burke. His statement was captured on video, providing undeniable evidence that would later play a crucial role in court. Further damning proof emerged when authorities searched his car. Inside, they discovered several of Lauren's personal belongings, including her iPod and bank cards, which had been used shortly after her death. Confronted with this overwhelming evidence, Lockhart gave a chillingly detailed account of what had transpired on the evening of March 4, 2008. According to his confession, Lockhart had woken up that morning inside his silver Chrysler Sebring. He had spent the previous night in his car, parked not far from East Alabama Medical Center. He was homeless, desperate, and in dire need of money. The instability of his life had pushed him deeper into a cycle of crime, and by the morning of March 4, 2008, he was actively searching for another victim. As he drove aimlessly through the streets of Auburn, he fixated on one pattern. All of his previous targets had been women. Not once had he attacked a man. The reasoning behind his choice of victims was never fully explained, but his actions that night would culminate in one of the most senseless and tragic crimes Auburn had ever witnessed. After circling the city for hours, Lockhart's drive ended on the campus of Auburn University. He maneuvered his silver Chrysler Sebring into a parking space next to the student dorms and remained inside his vehicle, observing the students come and go. Time ticked by, yet he continued watching in silence, waiting for the right opportunity. Then, at approximately 8 p.m., his patience paid off. A young woman approached the vehicle next to his, moving with casual ease, completely unaware of the danger lurking just feet away. It was Lauren Burke. Without hesitation, Lockhart grabbed his revolver, stepped out of his car, and crept up behind her. Before she could react, he demanded to know how much money she had with her. Fear paralyzed Lauren, and before she could answer, Lockhart shoved her into the front passenger seat of her own car and slid behind the wheel. According to Lockhart's later confession, Lauren did nothing. After several moments, when she finally calmed down, she reached into her purse, retrieved $200 and handed it to him. She pleaded for her life, begging him to take the money and let her go. But Lockhart had no intention of stopping there. Instead, his demands escalated. He ordered Lauren to remove her shoes. Faced with the terrifying threat, she hesitated before complying, slowly taking off her shoes. According to Lockhart, there was only one reason for this horrifying command. He thought that if she were without shoes, it would be too awkward for her to try to escape. But investigators later speculated that there may have been a far more sinister motive behind his actions. Lockhart then started the car and began driving through the dimly lit streets of Auburn, one hand on the wheel and the other gripping his weapon. Lauren, displaying remarkable bravery, did everything she could to talk him down. She tried to appeal to his humanity, desperately attempting to reason with him. When he declared that his life was over and that there was no way out for him, she reassured him that he could turn things around. She even offered to help him find a job, hoping to shift his focus and save her own life. At some point during the drive, Lauren's phone began to ring. Lockhart ordered her to answer it and say something that wouldn't raise suspicion. The call was from Michael, her classmate, who was waiting for her at the library. With no other choice, Lauren did as she was told. She answered in a composed voice, claiming that she had forgotten about their meeting. Before Michael could say anything else, she quickly hung up. The brief exchange must have left Michael confused, but it wasn't enough to alert him that something was seriously wrong. Lauren refused to give up. As Lockhart continued driving, she kept trying to talk him into letting her go. She promised she would not report him, that she would not tell anyone what had happened. But nothing seemed to sway him. As they approached Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate last-ditch effort to save herself. The moment she saw an opportunity, She reached for the door handle and flung the car door open. But in that split second, Lockhart's gun discharged. Critically wounded, Lauren tumbled onto the pavement. Despite her injuries, she fought to stay conscious, weakly waving to passing cars, hoping someone would stop and help her. But her strength soon faded, and she lost consciousness as her body lay motionless on the road. Lockhart, watching from the car, realized what had happened. He pulled over outside a nearby church and observed the growing number of vehicles pulling over. He knew it was only a matter of time before the police arrived. Without a second thought, he fled the scene. Realizing that evidence inside Lauren's car could link him to the crime, Lockhart devised a plan. He drove to a gas station and purchased a can of gasoline, using Lauren's bank card to pay for it. He then returned to her car and drenched the interior with fuel, determined to destroy any forensic evidence that might tie him to the murder. However, he made a bizarre decision. Instead of setting the car on fire immediately, he got back inside and drove toward the Auburn campus, where his Chrysler Sebring was parked. The entire time, the overwhelming stench of gasoline filled the car, making him lightheaded. To avoid passing out, he rolled down the windows to let fresh air in. One might wonder why he didn't just torch the car at the gas station or at the crime scene. Why did he risk driving a vehicle that could ignite at any moment from a single spark? Some experts speculated that this recklessness stemmed from his deteriorating mental state. Others pointed to his history of poor decision-making and impulsivity. Regardless of the reason, Lockhart ultimately made it back to the campus parking lot, where he proceeded with his final steps. Upon arrival, he retrieved $46 and the bank cards from Lauren's car before setting it ablaze. As flames consumed the vehicle, he climbed into his Chrysler and sped away. But his bizarre behavior did not end there. Instead of disappearing into the night, he drove to another gas station, once again using Lauren's stolen money to refuel. Then, unable to resist his own curiosity, he circled back to the campus once more to see if the fire had completely destroyed the evidence. Investigators would later find this behavior both brazen and reckless, indicative of someone who was losing control of their own actions. As detectives pieced together Lockhart's movements, they began questioning the accuracy of his statements. While he claimed that he had only forced Lauren to undress to prevent her from escaping, investigators were deeply skeptical. Given his history of crimes against women, it seemed more likely that he had far darker intentions, ones he had ultimately been unable to fulfill due to Lauren's sudden and courageous escape attempt. Investigators had serious doubts about Lockhart's claim that Lauren was shot by accident. It seemed implausible, especially given his background. On March 9, 2008, Lauren's family and friends gathered to say their final goodbyes, devastated by the loss of the young woman whose life had been stolen so cruelly. That same day, investigators conducted a second round of questioning with Lockhart, pressing him further on his version of events. The next day, formal charges were brought against him, including capital murder, kidnapping, and robbery. Prosecutors wasted no time in preparing for trial. The trial began on November 8, 2010. Lockhart's defense attorneys argued that his actions were the result of a mental illness caused by his military service. They insisted that he suffered from severe psychological trauma and that Lauren's death was the result of a tragic accident. According to court documents, Lockhart entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The defense also attempted to portray him as an emotionally stunted and immature individual whose actions were not premeditated. However, prosecutors sought to counter this narrative, arguing that his pattern of violent behavior and prior crimes demonstrated intent and awareness of his actions. The state made an effort to introduce evidence of Lockhart's previous offenses, including his discharge from the military, his string of carjackings, and his history of attacking women. However, the trial judge ruled against admitting this information, deeming it prejudicial and unrelated to the specific charges in Lauren's case. Following the guilty verdict, the sentencing phase began. In a detailed 28-page sentencing order, the judge explained his reasoning for rejecting the jury's recommendation of life in prison without parole. The court placed significant weight on the aggravating factors of the crime, particularly the element of kidnapping. Lauren was alone, unarmed, and chosen at random, making her particularly vulnerable. The judge also emphasized the chilling nature of the crime. Lockhart had forced Lauren to remove her shoes, knowing that it would leave her helpless and unable to escape. His disciplinary record, which included assaults, prohibited substances abuse, and desertion, had been excluded from the trial. The court strongly suggested that had the jury been privy to this information, their recommendation might have been different. 15 years have passed since Lauren Burke's tragic death, and Courtney Lockhart remains on death row, continuing to fight against his sentence. After his conviction, he filed multiple appeals. In August 2013, an Alabama court upheld his sentence. Undeterred, he escalated his case to the Alabama Supreme Court, which also rejected his appeal in September 2014. Determined to exhaust every legal avenue, Lockhart took his case to the Supreme Court of the United States in January 2015. However, in April of that year, the highest court in the nation declined to hear his petition, leaving his conviction intact. In 2018, Lockhart launched yet another appeal, this time with the assistance of lawyers from a human rights organization. His new legal team argued that his defense attorneys from the 2010 trial had mishandled his case. They claimed that crucial evidence had not been presented, and that a stronger defense strategy could have resulted in a different outcome. While the court acknowledged some deficiencies in his original defense, it ultimately determined that these shortcomings had no bearing on the final verdict. Once again, the death sentence remained in place. The legal battle continued in 2021, when Lockhart made another attempt to challenge his sentence. However, in April of that year, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals reaffirmed the death penalty, effectively closing another door on his hopes for clemency.